Michael Stevens never imagined that agreeing to help his 7-year-old neighbor with what he thought was a silly talent show performance would completely change his life. What started as a reluctant favor to keep a persistent little girl quiet turned into the moment that brought back the love he thought he'd lost forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning it all began, Michael was hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, trying to balance his freelance graphic design work with the chaos of single parenthood. His 9-year-old son Jake was upstairs getting ready for school, taking his sweet time as usual. The coffee maker gurgled in the background, producing the 3rd cup Michael would need to function properly. Then came the knock at the door. Michael glanced at the clock. 7:45. Too early for visitors, too late for deliveries. He padded to the front door in his worn slippers and opened it to find Emma Rodriguez, the little girl from next door, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. "Mr. Stevens! Mr. Stevens! I need your help!" Emma's dark curls bounced as she spoke, her gap-toothed smile stretching from ear to ear. Michael looked past her to see if her mother Carmen was anywhere in sight. The driveway next door was empty. Carmen must have already left for her job at the hospital. "What's up, kiddo? Shouldn't you be getting ready for school?" Emma's face scrunched up in frustration. "I am ready. Look!" She gestured to her carefully chosen outfit, a bright purple dress with silver stars and matching tights. "But I need to ask you something super important before school." Michael sighed internally. Emma Rodriguez had been living next door with her single mother for about 8 months now, ever since Carmen took the nursing job at Cedar Falls General Hospital. The little girl had immediately attached herself to Michael and Jake, probably because they were the only other family on the block without a traditional mom and dad setup. "All right, come in for a minute, but make it quick. Jake needs to catch his bus soon." Emma practically skipped into the kitchen, her eyes bright with excitement. "So you know how our school is having the Spring Talent Showcase next Friday?" Michael nodded absently, pouring himself another cup of coffee. He vaguely remembered Jake mentioning something about it, though his son had shown zero interest in participating. "Well, I really want to sing in it. I've been practicing this song for weeks, and I know all the words, and I even made up some dance moves." But Emma's confidence faltered slightly. "The thing is, all the other kids who signed up are doing their acts with their moms or dads or brothers or sisters, and my mom has to work that night because someone called in sick." Michael could see where this was heading. "Emma, I'm sure you'll do great on your own. You're a brave kid." "But that's not the problem." Emma's voice rose with urgency. "The problem is that my song needs someone to sing with me. It's Count on Me by Bruno Mars, and there's a part where it goes back and forth between 2 people. I can't do it by myself." "What about asking one of your friends from school?" Emma shook her head vigorously. "I already tried. Sophia is doing a dance with her sister, and Mia is playing piano with her dad, and Tommy is doing magic tricks, but he says singing is for girls, which is totally not true because lots of boys sing." Michael set down his coffee mug and really looked at Emma for the first time that morning. Beneath her excitement, he could see a flicker of disappointment, the kind that kids try to hide when they think the adults might change their minds about something important. "So what exactly are you asking me to do?" Emma took a deep breath, as if she'd been rehearsing this moment. "I want you to sing with me. I know you can sing because I heard you humming when you were working in your garden last weekend, and you sounded really good. Plus, Jake told me you used to be in a band in college." Michael nearly choked on his coffee. "Jake told you that?" "Uh-huh. He said you played guitar and sang and that you even wrote songs. He showed me a picture of you with long hair and everything." "Great. His son was apparently sharing his embarrassing college photos with the neighborhood kids. Michael made a mental note to have a conversation with Jake about privacy. "Emma, I appreciate the confidence, but I haven't performed in front of people in over 15 years. And a school talent show, that's really more of a family thing." Emma's face fell. "But you are family, kind of. You're like my American uncle." Michael couldn't help but smile at that. Emma's mother, Carmen, had immigrated from Colombia when Emma was 5, and the little girl often mixed up cultural references in endearing ways. "Look, kiddo, even if I wanted to help, which I'm not saying I do, I don't know the song you want to sing." Emma's expression brightened immediately. "That's okay. I can teach it to you. It's super easy, and I already have the music on my mom's phone. We could practice after school today." Before Michael could respond, Jake's voice boomed from upstairs. "Dad, I can't find my science project." "It's on the dining room table where you left it last night," Michael called back, then turned to Emma. "Listen, I need to get Jake ready for school. Can we talk about this later?" Emma's shoulders slumped, but she nodded. "Okay, but will you at least think about it? Please. The sign-up deadline is tomorrow, and if I don't have a partner, I can't perform." Something in her voice tugged at Michael's heart. He recognized that tone. It was the same one Jake had used when he'd asked if his mom might come back someday. The voice of a kid trying to be brave while hoping for something that might not happen. "I'll think about it," Michael said, and Emma's entire face lit up. "Really? You promise?" "I promise I'll think about it. Now go catch your bus before you're late." Emma threw her arms around Michael's waist in a quick hug, then practically danced out the front door. Michael watched through the window as she skipped down the sidewalk to where the school bus was just pulling up. "Dad, seriously, where's my project?" Jake appeared in the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his hair sticking up. "At odd angles. Dining room table," Michael repeated, then studied his son's face. "Jake, did you really tell Emma about my college band?" Jake shrugged, grabbing a granola bar from the counter. "She asked why you always have music playing when you work. I just said you used to be in a band. What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that now she wants me to sing with her at the talent show." Jake paused mid-bite of his granola bar. "Are you going to do it?" "Of course not. I don't perform anymore. You know that." "Why not?" Michael opened his mouth to give his standard answer about being too busy, too old, too out of practice. But looking at Jake's genuinely curious expression, he realized he'd never actually explained it properly. "It's complicated, buddy. Performing used to be a big part of my life, but that was before everything changed." Jake nodded slowly. Michael knew his son understood that everything changed referred to the divorce, to Jake's mother leaving, to their whole world being turned upside down 3 years ago. "But Emma's just a little kid," Jake said. "It's not like you'd be playing at Madison Square Garden or whatever." "Madison Square Garden," Michael corrected automatically. "Whatever. The point is, it's just a school thing, and Emma's really nice. She always shares her cookies with me when Mom Carmen makes extras." Michael found himself thinking about that as he drove Jake to school. The bus had already left by the time they found the science project. Emma was a sweet kid, and Carmen Rodriguez was a good neighbor. When Michael's lawnmower had broken down last month, Carmen had immediately offered to let him borrow theirs. When Emma had gotten sick with the flu, Michael had picked up groceries for them without being asked. That was the thing about their little corner of Cedar Falls. Despite being a neighborhood full of single parents and non-traditional families, everyone looked out for each other. Still, performing was different. Michael hadn't sung in front of anyone except Jake since the divorce. Music had been something he'd shared with Sarah, his ex-wife. They'd met at an open mic night during his senior year of college, where she'd been impressed by his acoustic cover of Wonderwall. Looking back, he probably should have known that anyone who was genuinely impressed by Wonderwall might not be the most discerning judge of musical talent. But at the time, Sarah's enthusiasm had felt like validation. She'd encouraged him to keep playing, even after graduation, when he'd needed to find a real job to pay the bills. She'd been his biggest fan through the handful of local gigs he'd managed to book, always standing in the front row with her phone out, recording everything. When she'd left, when she'd decided that small-town life and single parenthood wasn't the adventure she'd signed up for, music had felt like another casualty of their failed marriage. Michael had packed away his guitar, along with the wedding photos, and hadn't touched either since. The workday passed in a blur of client emails and design revisions. Michael was deep in concentration, tweaking the color scheme for a local restaurant's logo, when Emma's voice drifted through his office window. 1, 2, 3, 4. He could hear her singing scales in her backyard, practicing with the determination of someone much older than 7. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Despite himself, Michael found himself listening. Emma had a sweet, clear voice with good pitch control for her age. She wasn't just singing for fun. She was actually working at it, repeating difficult passages until she got them right. After about 20 minutes, the singing stopped, and Michael heard Carmen's car pull into the driveway next door. A few minutes later, there was a knock at his door. This time it was Carmen, still in her hospital scrubs, looking tired but smiling. "Hi, Michael. I hope you don't mind me bothering you. Emma told me she asked you about the talent show this morning." Michael gestured for her to come in. "She's a persistent kid, I'll give her that," Carmen laughed. "That's one way to put it. She's been talking about this talent show for weeks. I feel terrible that I can't be there. We're so short-staffed at the hospital right now, and I can't afford to turn down overtime shifts." "You don't need to explain," Michael said. "I get it. Single-parent life means making tough choices." "Exactly." Carmen's expression grew more serious. "Look, I know Emma put you in an awkward position this morning. If you're not comfortable doing this, I completely understand. I can help her find a different song to perform solo." Michael studied Carmen's face. She was trying to be diplomatic, but he could see the disappointment there too. Emma had clearly inherited her mother's expressive eyes. "Can I ask you something? How important is this to her?" Carmen sighed. "Very. Emma's had a hard time adjusting since we moved here. Not because people aren't nice, everyone's been wonderful. But she misses her friends from our old neighborhood, and she's been feeling like she doesn't quite fit in at school yet." Michael nodded. He remembered Jake going through something similar after the divorce. "She sees this talent show as her chance to really be part of things here," Carmen continued, "to show her classmates what she can do, and honestly, she's good, really good. I think she could have a real future in music if she wants it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. "Would you like to hear her practice?" Carmen asked. "Not to pressure you, just so you can see what I mean about her talent." Before Michael could answer, Emma's voice came floating through the open window again. This time she was singing "Count on Me," and Michael had to admit that Carmen was right. The kid had genuine talent, but it was more than that. There was something in the way Emma sang, a joy, a confidence, an absolute belief in the power of the song to connect with people that reminded Michael of why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. "She really is good," he said quietly. Carmen smiled. "She is, and Michael, she really looks up to you and Jake. Having a male figure in her life who takes her seriously, who doesn't talk down to her because she's a little girl. It means a lot." Michael felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time someone had looked up to him? Jake, obviously, but Jake was his son. That was different. Emma chose to see something in Michael that he'd forgotten was there. "What's the song about?" he asked. "Friendship. Being there for people when they need you. It's actually perfect for a talent show because it's about bringing people together." Michael walked to the window and looked out at Emma's backyard, where she was now practicing the dance moves she'd mentioned, spinning and swaying with unself-conscious enthusiasm. If I said yes, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what would that look like exactly? Carmen's face brightened. Nothing too complicated. You just need to learn your parts of the song, maybe do a few practice sessions with Emma to work out the timing. The actual performance is only about 3 minutes long. And when is this happening? Next Friday evening, 7 o'clock start. Time, Michael calculated quickly. Friday was usually his night to catch up on work, while Jake did homework or played video games. Nothing that couldn't be rearranged. I need to think about it, he said finally. Carmen nodded. Of course. Just whatever you decide, please let Emma know by tomorrow morning. The sign-up deadline is at noon, and I don't want to get her hopes up if it's not going to work out. After Carmen left, Michael found himself unable to concentrate on work. He kept hearing Emma's voice, singing with such pure enthusiasm. When Jake got home from school, Michael was still staring at his computer screen, having accomplished exactly nothing for the past 2 hours. "Dad, you okay?" Jake dropped his backpack by the door and grabbed an apple from the counter. "Yeah, just thinking." "About Emma's talent show thing?" Michael looked at his son with surprise. "How did you know?" "She texted me during lunch, asked if I thought you were going to say yes." "Emma has a phone?" "Her mom's old one. She mostly uses it to text me and play games." Jake took a bite of his apple. "So are you?" "Am I what?" "Going to say yes." Michael leaned back in his chair. "What do you think I should do?" Jake considered this seriously, which was one of the things Michael loved about his son. Even at 9, Jake thought before he spoke. "I think Emma would be really happy if you did it, and you're always telling me I should try new things and not be scared of failing. This is different." Why? It was a simple question, but Michael found himself struggling to answer it. Why was this different? Because he was an adult? Because he'd been hurt before? Because performing felt too much like opening himself up to judgment and disappointment? "I guess I'm out of practice," he said finally. Jake shrugged. "So, practice. Emma said she'd teach you the song." That evening, as Michael was making dinner, he heard Emma singing again. This time she was working on the harmony parts, singing both voices herself and switching back and forth. It was impressive for a 7-year-old, but it also highlighted exactly why she needed a partner. Michael found himself humming along, his muscle memory kicking in as he automatically found the harmonies. The song was catchy, with a simple but effective melody that showcased Emma's voice without being too challenging for an amateur partner. Before he could stop himself, Michael was singing softly under his breath, working out which parts would be his if he were to hypothetically agree to this crazy plan. "Dad, are you singing Emma's song?" Jake had appeared in the kitchen doorway without Michael noticing. Michael cleared his throat, embarrassed. "Just trying to figure out how it goes." Jake grinned. "It sounds good. You should go ask Emma to teach you the rest." "I haven't decided anything yet. But you're thinking about it." Michael couldn't deny that. He was definitely thinking about it. The question was whether thinking about it was the same as being willing to actually do it. The next morning, Michael woke up with Bruno. Mars stuck in his head. He'd spent half the night unconsciously working out harmonies for Count on Me, his brain refusing to let go of the musical puzzle Emma had presented him with. Jake was already at the breakfast table, methodically eating cereal while scrolling through something on his tablet. "Morning, buddy. Sleep okay?" "Yeah. Did you dream about singing? You were humming in your sleep." Michael paused, mid-coffee pour. "I was not. You totally were. It was Emma's song." Jake looked up with a knowing smirk that reminded Michael uncomfortably of himself at that age. Before Michael could respond, there was a soft knock at the back door. Through the glass, he could see Emma's face pressed against the window, her breath fogging up the pane as she waited anxiously. Michael opened the door, and Emma immediately launched into speech without preamble. "So I know you said you'd think about it, and I tried really hard not to bother you, but Mom said the deadline is today at noon, and I just really need to know. Because if you can't do it, then I need time to pick a different song that I can do by myself, which is totally fine if you don't want to. But I really, really hope you do want to, because I practiced extra hard last night, and I think we could be really good together." She said all of this in one breath, then stood there looking at Michael with hopeful eyes. "Emma, slow down. Have you had breakfast?" "Toast, with jam, the strawberry kind." She held up her hands as evidence. There were indeed sticky fingerprints on her school clothes. Michael glanced at the clock. 7:30. He had 2.5 hours before Emma needed an answer. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. Jake and I are going to drive you to school with him today, so your mom doesn't have to worry about the bus. And after school, you're going to come over here and teach me this song properly. Then I'll make my decision." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really, you mean it? I mean, I'll listen to the song and see if I think I can do it justice. No promises beyond that." Emma nodded so vigorously that her curls bounced. "Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might be terrible." "You won't be terrible. Jake showed me a video of your old band on his laptop." Michael turned to stare at his son, who was suddenly very interested in his cereal bowl. "Jacob Stevens, what video?" Jake mumbled something into his breakfast. "What was that?" "I said it was just that one from your college talent show. The one where you did Black by Pearl Jam. It was on Mom's old Facebook page." Michael felt his stomach drop. Sarah's Facebook page. He'd forgotten she'd posted that video back when they were still together, still proud of each other's accomplishments. The performance Jake was talking about had been one of Michael's better moments, a stripped-down acoustic version that had actually won the competition. "That was a long time ago, Jake. You sounded really good, though. Emma thinks so, too." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "You did. Your voice is different from how you talk. It's more—" She scrunched up her face, searching for the word. "More smooth, like honey." Despite his anxiety, Michael found himself smiling. "Like honey? Yeah, and you looked happy when you were singing. Really happy." Michael studied Emma's earnest face. When was the last time someone had told him he looked happy doing something? The drive to school was filled with Emma's chatter about the talent show, the other acts that were signed up, and her detailed plans for their potential performance. She'd clearly given this a lot of thought. Madison Chen is doing a violin solo, and she's really good, but violin is kind of boring to watch. And the Martinez twins are doing some kind of hip-hop dance thing, but they keep fighting about who gets to be in front. Oh, and Mr. Peterson's daughter. She's in 5th grade. She's playing piano, but she always plays piano at everything, so that's not very exciting either. "What makes you think our act would be more exciting?" Michael asked, genuinely curious. "Because it's about friendship, and we'd be showing that different people can work together to make something beautiful. Plus, nobody else is doing a song with harmony parts." Jake twisted around in his passenger seat. "Emma, what if my dad chickens out?" "Jake," Michael warned. I mean, what if he decides he's too nervous?" Emma considered this seriously. "Then I guess I'd understand, but I don't think he will." "Why not?" "Because he's brave. He takes care of you all by himself, and that must be scary sometimes, but he does it anyway. So singing one song shouldn't be that scary compared to that." Michael caught Emma's eyes in the rearview mirror. For a 7-year-old, she had a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of what courage actually meant. After dropping the kids off, Michael found himself driving past the elementary school toward the music store on Maple Street. He hadn't been inside Harmony Music in at least 2 years, not since Jake had briefly expressed interest in learning drums. The bell chimed as he entered, and Tom Bradley looked up from behind the counter with surprise. Michael Stevens. Haven't seen you in here for a while. Tom was probably in his 60s, with grey hair pulled back in a ponytail and fingers stained from decades of guitar work. He'd been running Harmony Music since before Michael moved to Cedar Falls, and he had an encyclopedic knowledge of every musician in town. "Hey, Tom. Just browsing." "Browsing for anything in particular?" Michael wandered over to the acoustic guitars hanging on the wall. His fingers itched to touch the strings to see if he remembered how to form chords. "Actually, I have a weird question. You know that Bruno Mars song, Count on Me? Do you have the sheet music for it?" Tom's eyebrows went up. "Getting back into music? Maybe. It's complicated." Tom studied Michael's face for a moment, then nodded and disappeared into the back room. He returned with a folder of sheet music and flipped through it until he found what he was looking for. "Here we go. Pretty straightforward song, chord-wise. Mostly C, Am, F and G. Good choice for getting back into playing." Michael looked at the notation, and it all came flooding back. The way chord progressions worked, how harmonies layered together, the mathematical beauty of music theory that had first drawn him to songwriting in college. "Mind if I—" Michael gestured toward one of the guitars on the wall. "Go ahead. Martin's got a nice sound." Michael lifted the guitar carefully, feeling the familiar weight of it in his arms. He positioned his fingers on the fretboard, muscle memory guiding him to a C chord. When he strummed, the sound was clean and resonant. Without thinking, he began playing the opening of Count on Me, working through the chord progression by ear. It felt like riding a bicycle, awkward for the first few measures, then natural. "And automatic. Sounds good," Tom said quietly. "You haven't lost it." Michael played through the verse once more, then set the guitar back on its stand. His fingertips were already getting sore. It would take time to rebuild his calluses. "Tom, can I ask you something? When you stopped performing regularly, was it hard to start again?" Tom laughed. "Who says I stopped? I play open mic at Murphy's pub every Thursday night. Have for the past 3 years. Really, I had no idea. That's because you've been hiding from music, son. Happens to a lot of people after major life changes. The question is whether you're ready to stop hiding." Michael bought the sheet music and drove home, Tom's words echoing in his head. Was that what he'd been doing? Hiding from music? The rest of the morning passed slowly. Michael tried to focus on work, but his eyes kept drifting to the sheet music on his desk. Finally, he gave up and spent an hour watching YouTube videos of Count on Me performances, studying the way different artists interpreted the harmonies. By the time Emma knocked on his door that afternoon, Michael had made his decision. "Okay," he said as soon as he opened the door. "Let's do this." Emma's shriek of joy was probably audible 3 blocks away. She threw herself at Michael in a hug that nearly knocked him over. "Really, really, really, really? But we're going to do this right. That means serious practice, learning the parts properly, and no backing out once we commit." Emma nodded solemnly. "I promise, I'm a very good practitioner." They set up in Michael's living room, with Emma's phone connected to a portable speaker for the backing track. Michael had printed out 2 copies of the lyrics, one for each of them. "Okay, so the song starts with just me," Emma explained, suddenly. "All business. Then you come in on the second verse, and then we do the chorus together. The tricky part is the bridge where we trade off lines," she demonstrated, singing her parts with confidence and precision. Michael was impressed. She really had been practicing. "Your turn," Emma said, handing him his copy of the lyrics. Michael took a deep breath and sang his first verse. His voice felt rusty at first, but it warmed up quickly. By the second line, he was hitting the notes cleanly. Emma clapped when he finished. "That was perfect. Now let's try it together." They ran through the song 3 times, working out the timing and making sure their voices blended well. Michael was surprised by how natural it felt to sing with Emma. She had good instincts for harmony and adapted her volume to match his without being told. "This is going to be so good," Emma said after their third run-through. "Wait until everyone hears us." That's when it hit Michael. Everyone, as in an audience, as in parents and teachers and other kids, all watching him perform for the first time in years. "Emma, how many people usually come to these talent shows?" "Oh, lots. Last year the auditorium was totally full. Maybe like 200 people?" 300? Michael felt his throat tighten. 200 or 300 people. He'd performed for larger crowds in college, but that was different. That was when he was young and fearless, and hadn't yet learned how much it could hurt when people you cared about walked away. "Mr. Stevens, are you okay? You look kind of pale." Michael sat down heavily on the couch. "Emma, I need to be honest with you about something. I haven't performed in front of people in a really long time, and the last time I did, it didn't end well." Emma climbed up onto the couch next to him, her expression serious. What happened? Michael considered how to explain adult relationship. "Complications to a 7-year-old. Someone I cared about very much used to come to all my performances. She was my biggest fan. But then she decided she didn't want to be part of my life anymore. And after that, performing reminded me too much of missing her." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's really sad. But Mr. Stevens, that was then. This is now. And I'm your biggest fan now. Me and Jake and my mom." Something about the simple way she said it made Michael's chest tight with emotion. "Besides," Emma continued, "being scared just means it's important to you. My mom told me that. She said, if you're not a little scared, it probably doesn't matter very much." Michael looked at this wise little girl sitting next to him and felt something shift inside his chest. When had he started letting fear make his decisions for him? "You're right," he said. "It is important. You're important." Emma beamed. "So we're really doing this?" "We're really doing this. But Emma, I need you to understand something. I might mess up. I might forget words or sing off key or freeze up completely. If that happens, you keep going, okay? Don't let my nerves ruin your performance." Emma shook her head firmly. "We're partners. Partners stick together no matter what. That's what the song is about, remember? You can count on me like 1, 2, 3. I'll be there." She sang the line with such conviction that Michael felt his doubts beginning to dissolve. "Okay, partner, let's run through it again." They practiced for another hour, working on their stage positions and the simple choreography Emma had planned. Nothing too elaborate, just some swaying and hand gestures that would add visual interest without distracting from the vocals. When Carmen came home from work, she found them in the backyard, using Michael's patio as a makeshift stage, while Jake provided feedback from his position as sole audience member. "That sounded beautiful," Carmen called out. "So I take it you two are officially partners now?" Emma ran over to her mother, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mom, we're so good together. Michael's voice is perfect with mine, and we figured out all the harmonies, and Jake says we're going to win the whole thing." "I said you might win," Jake corrected. "Competition's pretty stiff this year," Carmen laughed. "Well, win or lose, I'm proud of both of you for doing this." "Michael, thank you. This means more to Emma than you know." Michael watched Emma demonstrate their choreography for her mother, her face glowing with happiness and anticipation. For the first time in years, he was part of something that had nothing to do with work or parental responsibilities or managing the logistics of single-parent life. He was part of something purely joyful. That evening, after Emma had gone home and Jake was doing homework, Michael found himself at his computer, but instead of working on client projects, he was researching performance tips and vocal warm-up exercises. He even found himself browsing guitar tabs for other Bruno Mars songs, wondering if Emma might be interested in doing more music together after the talent show. The thought surprised him. More music, more performing. More of the thing he'd spent 3 years avoiding. But sitting there in his quiet house, humming harmony parts under his breath, Michael realized something had changed. For the first time since Sarah left, he was looking forward instead of backward, and that felt like the beginning of something new. The week leading up to the talent show flew by in a blur of after-school practice sessions and nervous energy. Michael found himself thinking about the performance at odd moments, while designing a logo for a local bakery, while grocery shopping, while helping Jake with his math homework. Wednesday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Michael was in his home office, tweaking a client's website layout, when Jake burst through the door without knocking. "Dad, you need to come see this, now." The urgency in Jake's voice made Michael immediately save his work and follow his son to the living room window. Outside, a small crowd had gathered in Emma's backyard. Carmen was there, along with 3 other women Michael recognized from the neighborhood, and they were all watching Emma perform what appeared to be a full dress rehearsal of her talent show act, except Emma was performing alone. "Where's her partner?" asked Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down. "I think it's supposed to be a duet," replied Janet Morrison from across the street. "Emma told my daughter she had a special surprise partner." Michael watched Emma finish the song, her voice carrying clearly through the open windows. She was good, really good, but the missing harmonies were obvious. The performance felt incomplete. "She's not telling them it's you," Jake observed. "She's keeping it a secret." "Why would she do that?" Jake shrugged. "Maybe she wants it to be a surprise. Or maybe she's worried people will think it's weird that a grown-up is performing at a kid's talent show." Michael hadn't considered that possibility. Was it weird? He'd been so focused on his own anxiety about performing that he hadn't thought about how their partnership might look to other parents. His phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Could you come over? Emma wants to practice the staging one more time before dinner." Michael found Emma in her backyard, looking frustrated and slightly dejected. "The spacing is all wrong when I do it by myself," she announced without preamble. "All my gestures are for 2 people, but there's only one of me." "That's because it's meant for 2 people," Michael said gently. "That's why we're partners, remember?" Emma's face brightened immediately. "Right! I forgot for a minute. Mrs. Chen asked me who my partner was, and I didn't know if I should tell her, so I just said it was a surprise." "Why didn't you want to tell her?" Emma scuffed the ground with her sneaker. "I guess I was worried she might think it was silly, a little kid and a grown-up singing together." Michael knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level. "Emma, look at me. There is absolutely nothing silly about what we're doing. We're making music together. That's one of the most natural things in the world." "Really? Really? Some of the best musical partnerships in history have been between people of different ages. Johnny Cash and his daughter Roseanne, Nat King Cole and his daughter Natalie, Frank Sinatra and his daughter Nancy." Emma's eyes widened. "There are famous fathers and daughters who sing together. Lots of them. And we don't have to be related to be a good team." Emma threw her arms around Michael's neck. "You're the best partner ever." They ran through their performance twice more, working on the transitions and making sure their microphone technique would work on the actual stage. Emma had convinced the music teacher, Mrs. Patterson, to let them have a quick sound check during lunch on Friday. Thursday evening, Michael made a decision that surprised even him. He drove to Murphy's pub. The place was smaller than he'd expected, with a tiny stage in one corner and maybe 30 people scattered around tables. Tom Bradley was on stage, playing a slow blues number on a beat-up acoustic guitar. His eyes closed. As he sang about lost love and second chances, Michael ordered a beer and found a table in the back, content to listen and observe. It had been years since he'd been in a room where live music was happening, and he'd forgotten how different it felt from recorded music. There was an intimacy to it, a vulnerability that came from real human voices and instruments in real time. When Tom finished his set, he spotted Michael in the crowd and came over with a surprised smile. "Didn't expect to see you here." Didn't expect to be here, Michael admitted. I'm performing tomorrow night, first time in years. Thought I should remember what it feels like to be in the audience. Tom nodded approvingly. Smart move. Mind if I ask what changed your mind about music? Michael told him about Emma, about the talent show, about how a 7-year-old's faith in him had somehow made performing feel possible again. Kids have a way of cutting through our complications, Tom said. They see what's real instead of what we're afraid of. I'm still afraid, Michael confessed. What if I freeze up? What if my voice cracks? What if I ruin her big moment? Tom took a sip of his beer and gestured toward the stage. You see that microphone up there? It doesn't care if you're nervous. It doesn't care if you used to be in a band or if you haven't performed in years. All it cares about is what you give it in the moment you're using it. Michael looked at the small stage, imagining himself up there with Emma tomorrow night. A thing about performance anxiety, Tom continued, is that it's usually not about the music. It's about everything else we pile on top of the music. The expectations, the comparisons, the fear of judgment. But if you can get back to just the music, just the joy of making sound with another person, the rest of it doesn't matter as much. Michael stayed until the open mic ended at 10, listening to a parade of amateur musicians work through their own fears and vulnerabilities on stage. Some were polished, some were rough around the edges, but all of them shared the same fundamental courage, the willingness to stand up and offer something of themselves to strangers. Friday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather and clear skies. Michael woke up with butterflies in his stomach, but also with a strange sense of calm. Today was the day. Emma appeared at his door at 7:15, already dressed in her performance outfit, a flowing blue dress with silver accents that caught the light when she moved. You look like a real performer, Michael told her, and Emma beamed. Mom curled my hair special. Do you like it? Emma's usually wild curls had been tamed into neat spirals that framed her face. She looked older somehow, more sophisticated. You look beautiful. Ready for our sound check? They drove to the school together, Emma chattering nervously about the other acts she'd seen rehearsing and speculating about who might win. The elementary school auditorium was bigger than Michael had expected, with probably 300 seats, arranged in neat rows, facing a proper stage with professional lighting. Mrs. Patterson, the music teacher, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of practical efficiency that came from years of managing children's performances. You must be Michael, she said, shaking his hand. Emma's told me so much about you. She's very excited about your duet. I hope I don't let her down. Oh, I doubt that. Emma's a good judge of character, and she clearly believes in you completely. The sound check went smoothly. Michael was relieved to discover that his voice carried well in the space and that the stage felt comfortable rather than intimidating. Emma was in her element, adjusting microphone heights and testing her positioning with the confidence of someone much older. This is going to be perfect, she announced after they'd run through the song once. I can feel it. Michael wished he shared her certainty, but he had to admit that their voices sounded good together in the acoustics of the auditorium. The rest of the day dragged by. Michael tried to work, but found himself staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. He did vocal warm-ups in his car. He reviewed the lyrics for the 100th time. He changed his shirt 3 times, finally settling on a simple black button-down that Jake approved of. You look like a real musician, Jake said, as they prepared to leave for the school. I am a real musician, Michael replied, and was surprised to realize he meant it. The auditorium was packed by the time they arrived. Michael spotted Carmen in the 3rd row, saving seats and looking almost as nervous as he felt. The backstage area was controlled chaos. Kids in costumes running around, parents fixing hair and adjusting outfits, Mrs. Patterson trying to maintain some semblance of order. Emma found Michael immediately, grabbing his hand and pulling him to a quiet corner. "I'm scared," she whispered, and Michael was surprised by her honesty. She'd seemed so confident all week. "Me too," he admitted. "But you know what? I think that means we care about doing a good job. What if I forget the words? Then I'll help you remember them." "What if I forget the words?" "Then I'll help you remember them," Emma said with a small smile. "What if we both forget the words? Then we'll make up new ones," Emma giggled. "But better ones." They watched the first few acts from the wings. Madison Chen's violin solo was technically perfect but lacked emotional connection. The Martinez twins' hip-hop routine was energetic but poorly synchronized. A fifth grader named Kevin played a decent piano arrangement of Für Elise, but looked terrified the entire time. "We're up next," Emma whispered as Kevin took his bows. Michael felt his heart rate spike, but when he looked down at Emma's face, determined, trusting, absolutely certain that they belonged on that stage together, his nerves transformed into something else. Not confidence exactly, but focus. Purpose. They walked onto the stage together, and Michael was struck by how quiet the auditorium became. 300 people, all focused on them, all waiting to see what they would offer. Emma stepped up to her microphone with the poise of a seasoned performer. Michael took his position beside her, close enough that they could see each other's faces throughout the song. The opening notes of the backing track filled the auditorium, and Emma began to sing. Her voice was clear and strong, filling the space with warmth and sincerity. Michael watched her face as she sang, saw the joy there, the absolute belief in the words she was singing. When his entrance came, he stepped forward to his microphone and added his voice to hers. The harmony was perfect. Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the magic of musical connection, the way two voices could blend to create something larger than the sum of their parts. Emma smiled at him as they sang, and he smiled back, both of them lost in the music. The audience disappeared. The stage lights dimmed to nothing. There was only the song, only their voices weaving together, only the pure joy of making music with someone who understood it the same way you did. When they reached the bridge, the part where they traded lines, back and forth, Michael realized he wasn't nervous anymore. He was home. This was where he belonged, where he'd always belonged, making music with someone who believed in the power of harmony. The final chorus soared, both voices joining in perfect unison, and Michael felt tears in his eyes. Not from sadness or fear, but from the overwhelming rightness of this moment, this partnership, this return to the thing he'd thought he'd lost forever. The song ended, and for a moment, the auditorium was completely silent. Then the applause began. Not polite school performance clapping, but real appreciation, the kind of response that comes from an audience that's been genuinely moved. Emma reached for Michael's hand as they took their bows, her face radiant with accomplishment and joy. They'd done it. They'd created something beautiful together. As they walked off stage, Michael felt lighter than he had in years. Whatever happened next, whether they won or lost, whether this led to more music or remained a single perfect moment, didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd remembered who he used to be, who he still was, underneath all the fear and hurt and protective numbness. He was a musician, and he was no longer afraid to be one. The applause was still echoing in Michael's ears as he and Emma made their way backstage. Other performers and their families crowded around them, offering congratulations and praise. Emma was glowing, accepting compliments with the gracious charm of someone who had always known this moment would come. "That was incredible," Mrs. Patterson appeared beside them, her eyes bright with excitement. In 20 years of organizing these shows, I've never heard a duet quite like that. The way your voices blended, it was like listening to a professional recording. Michael felt a flush of pride, not just for himself, but for Emma. She had been absolutely fearless up there, leading him through the performance with confidence and joy. "We need to get back to our seats," Michael said, conscious that there were still several acts to go. "Emma, you were amazing up there." "We were amazing," Emma corrected, squeezing his hand. "Partners, remember?" They found Carmen in the audience, who immediately pulled Emma into a fierce hug. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and Michael realized she had been crying during their performance. "I'm so proud of you, Mija," Carmen whispered into Emma's hair. "You were perfect." Michael settled into the seat Carmen had saved for him, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of performance. Jake leaned over from his spot next to Carmen. "Dad, that was seriously cool. You looked like you were having fun up there." Michael considered this. Fun wasn't quite the right word for what he'd experienced on stage. It had been more profound than fun. It had been a homecoming, a remembering of who he was beneath all. The layers of protection he'd built up over the years, the remaining acts felt like a blur. Michael tried to pay attention, to be respectful to the other performers, but his mind kept drifting back to those moments on stage when everything had clicked into place. The harmony he and Emma had created hadn't just been musical, it had been emotional, spiritual even. When the last performer finished, Mrs. Patterson returned to the stage with an envelope in her hand. "Before we announce our winners," she said, "I want to thank all of our performers for sharing their talents with us tonight. Every single act showed courage, creativity, and hard work, and that's what tonight is really about." The audience applauded politely, but Michael could feel the anticipation in the room. Everyone wanted to know who had won. This year's third place goes to Madison Chen for her beautiful violin performance of Bach's Air on the G string. Madison walked to the stage beaming, accepting her bronze medal with obvious delight. Second place goes to the Martinez twins for their energetic and creative hip-hop routine. The twins high-fived each other as they bounded onto the stage. Michael felt Emma tense beside him, her small hand gripping his arm. And this year's first-place winners for a performance that truly exemplified the spirit of collaboration and musical excellence: Emma Rodriguez and Michael Stevens. The auditorium erupted in applause. Emma let out a shriek of joy and launched herself at Michael in a hug that nearly knocked him off his chair. Through the noise and excitement, Michael heard Jake whooping and Carmen sobbing with pride. They made their way to the stage again, and Mrs. Patterson placed gold medals around both their necks. The weight of it felt significant, tangible proof that this moment had really happened. "Would you like to say anything?" Mrs. Patterson asked, holding the microphone toward them. Emma stepped forward without hesitation. "I just want to thank my partner Michael for believing in me and for teaching me that music is better when you share it with someone special." She turned to look at Michael, her gap-toothed grin infectious. "Your turn!" Michael took the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces in the auditorium. 300 people who had just witnessed his return to music, his return to himself. "Thank you," he said simply. "This little girl reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that music isn't about being perfect or impressing people. It's about connection. It's about finding harmony, not just in notes, but in life. Emma, thank you for being my partner and my teacher." As they walked off stage for the final time, Michael felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see a woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length auburn hair and familiar green eyes. His breath caught in his throat. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Sarah Stevens, stood before him, looking nervous and hopeful and exactly the same as she had 3 years ago when she'd walked out of his life. "Hi, Michael. I was in the audience tonight. I heard about the talent show from my sister, and I wanted to see Jake perform. I didn't know you were..." She gestured helplessly toward the stage they'd just left. Michael's mind raced. Sarah's sister lived in Cedar Falls. He'd forgotten that connection. Of course she would have heard about the talent show. Of course she might come to see if Jake was participating. You came to see Jake? I've been thinking about him a lot lately. About both of you. I know I don't have the right to just show up, but when I heard there was a talent show... Sarah's voice trailed off as she noticed Emma, who was standing close to Michael's side, still wearing her gold medal. "Who's this beautiful young lady?" Sarah asked, crouching down to Emma's level. "I'm Emma. I'm Michael's partner. We just won first place." Emma held up her medal proudly. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked from Emma to Michael. "Partner?" "Musical partner," Michael clarified quickly. "Emma is our neighbor. She needed someone to sing with, and I helped her out." "You were incredible up there," Sarah said softly. "Both of you. Michael, I had no idea you were performing again." The conversation was interrupted by Jake's arrival. He stopped short when he saw Sarah, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "Mom?" Sarah's composure cracked at the word. "Hi, baby, you've gotten so tall." Jake looked to Michael uncertainly, as if asking permission to be happy about seeing her. Michael's heart ached for his son, caught between loyalty and longing. "It's okay, Jake," Michael said gently. "You can talk to her." Emma, sensing the complexity of the situation with the emotional intelligence that children sometimes possess, tugged on Carmen's hand. "Mom, can we go get some cookies from the reception table?" Carmen, who had been watching the interaction with careful eyes, nodded. "Of course, Mija. Michael, we'll be right over there if you need anything." Michael was grateful for the privacy, even as he felt exposed and vulnerable, standing face to face with Sarah for the first time in 3 years. "You look good," Sarah said quietly. "Happy. I wasn't sure, after everything." "After you left," Michael said. Not unkindly, but not softly. Either, Sarah winced. "I deserved that. Michael, I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I need to tell you something. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." Michael felt Jake move closer to his side, and he put a protective arm around his son's shoulders. Whatever this conversation was going to be, Jake needed to hear it too. "What kind of mistake?" Michael asked. Sarah took a shaky breath. "I thought I wanted adventure. I thought small-town life was too limiting, that marriage and motherhood were holding me back from some bigger, more exciting life that was waiting for me out there." She gestured vaguely, as if out there was a place that could be pointed to. "So I left," she continued. "I moved to Portland, got a job at a startup, dated younger guys, went to music festivals, lived in a trendy apartment downtown. I thought I was finally living my real life. And," Michael prompted when she paused, "and I was miserable. Not right away. At first the novelty was enough, but after about 6 months I realized I wasn't living. I was just existing. All the things I thought would make me happy were just distractions from the fact that I'd given up the only things that actually mattered." Jake spoke up for the first time. "Why didn't you come back?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was ashamed, because I thought I'd hurt you both too badly to ask for forgiveness, because I was afraid you'd moved on without me." Michael studied Sarah's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but what he saw was genuine regret, real pain, and something that looked like the woman he'd fallen in love with years ago. "Sarah, you can't just show up after 3 years and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I know that. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I've learned from my mistakes, that I know what I want now, and what I want is to be part of your lives again. If you'll let me." Michael felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. 3 years ago, he would have said yes immediately. Sarah's return would have felt like the answer to every prayer he'd been afraid to voice. But 3 years ago, He hadn't learned to be happy on his own. He hadn't learned to be the kind of father Jake deserved. He hadn't rediscovered his love of music through the eyes of a 7-year-old girl who believed in the power of harmony. "Mom," Jake said quietly, "I missed you a lot, but Dad and I are okay now. We're good together." Michael felt a surge of pride at his son's words. Jake was protecting him, showing loyalty while still acknowledging his own feelings. "I can see that," Sarah said. "Jake, your dad is an amazing man. I always knew that even when I was too confused to appreciate it properly. And tonight, watching him perform with that little girl, I remembered why I fell in love with him in the first place." Michael felt something shift in his chest. For 3 years, he'd carried the belief that Sarah had left because he wasn't enough, not exciting enough, not successful enough, not worth staying for. But watching her face as she spoke, he realized that her leaving had never really been about him. It had been about her own fears and insecurities, her own struggle to figure out who she wanted to be. "Sarah, I need time to think about this," he said finally. "This is a lot to process, and I need to consider what's best for Jake." Sarah nodded eagerly. "Of course. I'm staying at my sister's house for a few days. Maybe we could talk. And more. Maybe I could take Jake for ice cream or something, just so we can start getting to know each other again." Michael looked down at Jake, who was clearly torn between hope and caution. "What do you think, buddy? Would you like to spend some time with your mom?" Jake considered this seriously. "Maybe we could all go together. Like not a date or anything, but just the 3 of us?" Michael felt his heart expand at his son's wisdom. Jake wanted to reconnect with his mother, but he also wanted to protect the stability he and Michael had built together. "I think that—" "Oh, good work," Michael said. "Why don't we start there and see how it goes?" Sarah's smile was radiant. "Thank you, both of you. I know I have a lot to prove, but I want to try." As if summoned by some parental instinct, Emma appeared at Michael's side again, having apparently decided the adult conversation had gone on long enough. "Michael, they have chocolate chip cookies at the reception, and Mrs. Patterson says we get to take our trophy home tonight." Michael looked down at Emma's beaming face, then back at Sarah, who was watching the interaction with curious eyes. "Sarah, this is Emma Rodriguez. She's the reason I'm performing again." Emma studied Sarah with the frank assessment that only children can get away with. "Are you Jake's mum? He has your eyes." "I am," Sarah said softly, "and you're the one who convinced Michael to sing again." Emma nodded proudly. "We're partners. He was scared at first, but I told him that being scared just means something's important to you." Sarah's eyes met Michael's over Emma's head. "That's very wise advice." "Emma's full of wise advice," Michael said. "She's also right about those cookies. We should probably join the reception before they're all gone." As they walked toward the cookie table, Michael felt the strangeness of the moment. An hour ago, his biggest concern had been whether he'd remember all the words to their song. Now he was navigating the return of his ex-wife, while trying to process his own transformation from scared single dad to confident performer. The evening that had started as Emma's talent show had become something much larger, a catalyst for changes Michael hadn't seen coming. Whether those changes would lead to reconciliation with Sarah or simply to a better co-parenting relationship, he didn't know yet. What he did know was that he was no longer the same man who had agreed to help. A little girl with her talent show performance. He was someone who believed in the power of harmony again. Someone who wasn't afraid to take the stage. Someone who had remembered that the best partnerships, whether in music or in life, were built on trust, mutual respect, and the willingness to let your voice blend with someone else's to create something beautiful, and that regardless of what happened with Sarah, felt like winning. The days following the talent show felt surreal to Michael. The gold medal hung on Jake's bedroom wall next to his soccer trophies, a tangible reminder that the performance had actually happened. But it was the changes in his daily routine that really drove home how much had shifted in his world. Saturday morning brought the first of what would become weekly breakfast meetings with Sarah. They'd chosen Mabel's Diner on Main Street, neutral, territory that held no particular memories for any of them. Jake had been nervous all morning, changing his shirt twice and asking Michael if his hair looked okay. "You look fine, buddy," Michael assured him as they walked toward the diner. "Remember, this is just breakfast, no pressure." But Michael felt the pressure himself. 3 days of text messages and phone calls had established the basic framework of Sarah's return. She'd quit her job in Portland. She was staying with her sister indefinitely, and she wanted to rebuild relationships with both of them. The logistics were straightforward enough. The emotions were infinitely more complicated. Sarah was already waiting in a corner booth when they arrived, looking polished but nervous in a way Michael remembered from their early dating days. She stood up when she saw Jake, and for a moment, nobody seemed to know what to do. "Hi, Mom," Jake said finally, and the word seemed to unlock something in Sarah. She stepped forward and hugged him, carefully, respectfully, as if she was afraid he might disappear. "Hi, baby. Thank you for agreeing to see me." They settled into the booth with Michael and Jake on one side, Sarah on the other. The waitress, a woman named Dolores, who'd been working at Mabel's since before Michael moved to Cedar Falls, came over with coffee and took their orders with the efficient friendliness of someone who'd seen every possible family drama play out in her section. "So," Sarah said after Dolores left, "tell me about school, Jake. What's your favorite subject?" Jake launched into a description of his science class and their current unit on weather patterns. Michael watched Sarah's face as she listened. Really listened to their son's enthusiastic explanation of cloud formations and barometric pressure. This was different from the distracted attention she'd often paid to Jake's interests before she left. Something had changed in her, some fundamental shift in her ability to be present. "That sounds fascinating," Sarah said when Jake finished. "I always loved science when I was your age. Did you know I wanted to be a meteorologist before I decided to study marketing?" Jake's eyes widened. "Really? You wanted to study the weather?" "I did. I was obsessed with tornadoes. I read every book I could find about storm chasing." Michael was surprised by this revelation. In all their years together, Sarah had never mentioned an interest in meteorology. But as she continued talking with Jake about different types of storm systems, he could see the genuine enthusiasm in her face. "What made you change your mind?" Jake asked. Sarah's expression grew more serious. "I guess I started listening to other people's opinions about what I should do instead of trusting my own instincts. It's a mistake I've made more than once." Her eyes met Michael's briefly, and he understood that she was talking about more than just career choices. The conversation continued through breakfast, touching on Jake's friends, his soccer team, his favorite video games. Sarah asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. When Jake excused himself to use the bathroom, she turned to Michael. "He's incredible. You've done such a good job raising him." "We've done a good job," Michael corrected gently. "The first 9 years were both of us, remember?" Sarah nodded, looking down at her coffee cup. "I know, but the last 3 years, that was all you. And he's confident, articulate, kind. Those are qualities you nurtured in him." Michael felt a complex mix of pride and sadness. Sarah's praise meant something to him, but it also highlighted the years she'd missed. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Are you here because you realized you made a mistake, or are you here because being alone got too hard?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Both, I think, but mostly the first one. Michael, I know how this must look. The woman who ran away coming back when it's convenient. But Portland taught me something important about myself." "What's that?" I learned that I'm not someone who thrives on uncertainty and adventure. I'm someone who needs roots, stability, and meaningful relationships. I spent 3 years trying to be someone I'm not, and all it did was make me miserable and hurt the people I love most. Jake returned from the bathroom, sliding back into the booth beside Michael. "What are you guys talking about?" "Just catching up," Michael said. "How are you feeling about all this, Jake? You can be honest." Jake looked between his parents thoughtfully. "It's weird," he said finally. "Good, weird, but still weird. Like I'm happy to see Mom, but I'm also kind of scared." "Scared of what?" Sarah asked gently. "Scared that you might leave again. Scared that things will change too much. Dad and I have a good thing going, and I don't want to mess that up." Michael felt a surge of protective love for his son's honesty and emotional intelligence. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Jake, I understand why you'd feel that way. I broke your trust when I left, and trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. All I can do is promise you that I'm not going anywhere this time, and then prove it to you with my actions." "How will you prove it?" Jake asked. "By being consistent, by showing up when I say I will, by putting you and your dad first, the way I should have been doing all along." After breakfast, they walked through downtown Cedar Falls together. The late October weather was crisp and clear, with maple leaves crunching under their feet. It felt almost normal, a family taking a Saturday morning stroll, except for the undercurrent of careful politeness that marked them as people still figuring out how to be around each other. They stopped at the playground, where Michael used to bring Jake when he was younger. Sarah sat on a bench while Jake demonstrated his ability to cross the monkey bars, a skill he'd developed since she'd been gone. "Look, Mom, I can go all the way across without stopping." "That's amazing, honey. You've gotten so strong." Michael sat down beside Sarah, watching their son play with an unconscious confidence that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "He's really okay," Sarah said quietly. "I was so afraid that leaving would damage him permanently." "It did hurt him," Michael said honestly. "But kids are resilient. We worked through it together." Did you ever date anyone?" The question caught Michael off guard. "A few times. Nothing serious. You?" Sarah nodded. "I dated, tried to convince myself I was living this exciting single life, but it never felt real. I kept comparing everyone to you." Michael didn't know how to respond to that. Part of him wanted to tell her that he'd done the same thing, that no one had ever measured up to what they'd had together. But another part of him remembered the pain of her leaving, the months of wondering what he'd done wrong. "Sarah, if we're going to figure this out, whatever this ends up being, we need to be honest about what went wrong before." Sarah turned to face him fully. "You're right, Michael. I want you to know that leaving had nothing to do with you not being enough. You were everything I should have wanted. You were kind, faithful, a wonderful father, someone who loved me completely." "Then, why?" "Because I was 25 when we got married, and I felt like I'd never had a chance to figure out who I was as an individual. I went straight from my parents' house to college to living with you. I'd never been alone, never had to rely on myself, never gotten to make mistakes and learn from them. Michael understood this better than he wanted to admit. He'd sometimes wondered if they'd gotten serious too quickly, if they'd confused compatibility with readiness for marriage. "The irony," Sarah continued, "is that spending 3 years alone taught me that I don't actually want to be alone. I want to be with you and Jake. I want to be part of a family. But I needed to choose it freely, not just fall into it because it was the expected next step. And you think you've done that now? Chosen it freely?" "I know I have. Michael, I spent 3 years dating men who were exciting but unreliable, living in a city that was stimulating but lonely, working jobs that were challenging but meaningless. And the whole time, I kept thinking about Saturday mornings at Mabel's. Dinah and Jake's soccer games, and the way you used to play guitar while I cooked dinner. Michael felt something crack open in his chest at the mention of those mundane domestic moments that had once defined their life together. I kept thinking, about the night Jake was born, Sarah went on, and how you cried when you held him for the first time. I kept thinking about our wedding day, and how you forgot your vows because you were so nervous, so you just spoke from your heart instead. Michael remembered that day, how he'd stood at the altar, looked into Sarah's eyes, and thrown away the carefully written speech he'd prepared in favor of simply telling her how much he loved her. I kept thinking about all these small, beautiful moments, and I realized that what I'd been calling boring was actually contentment, peace, love. Jake ran over to them, his cheeks flushed from playing. Can we go see Emma? I want to tell her about breakfast. Michael looked at Sarah. Emma's the little girl I performed with. She lives next door to us. Would you like to meet her properly? I'd love to. They found Emma in her backyard, practicing a new song she was learning for chorus class. When she saw Michael approaching Jake and a woman she didn't recognize, she stopped singing and ran over to the fence. Michael! Jake! Did you bring your mom? She asked Sarah directly. I did, Sarah said, charmed by Emma's straightforward approach. You must be the famous Emma. I'm Sarah. I'm the famous Emma, Emma agreed solemnly. Michael's told you about me. He has. He told me you're an incredible singer and that you helped him remember how much he loves music. Emma beamed at this. Michael's a really good singer. Did you know he used to be in a band? Sarah smiled. I did know that. I was at a lot of their concerts. Really, were they good? They were very good. Michael has always been talented. Emma nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Are you going to stay in Cedar Falls? Because Michael and Jake are really nice, and it would be sad if you had to go away again. Sarah's breath caught slightly at the directness of the question. I'm planning to stay, yes. Good, Emma said decisively. Michael needs someone to sing with, who's his own age sometimes. I'm getting pretty good, but I'm still learning. Carmen appeared on the back porch, having heard voices in the yard. Michael introduced her to Sarah, and the two women chatted politely about the neighborhood and Emma's musical progress. Emma's been good for Michael, Carmen told Sarah quietly while the kids played. She got him out of his shell, reminded him that he has gifts worth sharing. I can see that, Sarah said. He seems lighter than he was before, more confident. Performing again changed something in him. It was like watching someone remember who they used to be. Michael, overhearing this conversation, felt the truth of it. The man standing in Emma's backyard was different from the man who had reluctantly agreed to help with a talent show 2 weeks ago. That man had been hiding from his own gifts, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of being seen. This man was someone who could stand on a stage and sing harmony with a 7-year-old, someone who could face his ex-wife with honesty instead of defensiveness. As they walked home that evening, Jake between them, Michael felt cautiously optimistic about the future. They weren't rushing into anything. Sarah was staying at her sister's house. They were taking things slowly, building trust gradually. But for the first time in 3 years, Michael could imagine a future that included all 3 of them. Dad? Jake said as they reached their front porch. Yeah, buddy? I'm glad Mom came back, but I'm also glad we learned how to be okay without her. Michael looked down at his wise, thoughtful son and felt his heart swell with pride and love. Me too, Jake. Me too. Later that night, after Jake had gone to bed, Michael found himself in his home office, not working on client projects, but writing music for the first time in years. Simple chord progressions, fragments of melodies, words about second chances, and the courage it takes to harmonize with another person. He was still writing when his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Thank you for today, for letting me back. into your lives slowly, respectfully. I know I have a lot to prove, but today felt like a beginning. Michael set down his guitar and typed back, "It did feel like a beginning. A different kind of beginning than what we had before, but maybe that's exactly what we need." Outside his window, he could hear Emma practicing scales in her backyard, her clear voice carrying through the cool night air. Tomorrow, he thought, he might ask her if she wanted to learn a new song, something about families and second chances, and the way harmony could bring people together. After all, Emma had taught him that music was always better when you shared it with someone special. And now, for the first time in years, Michael had the possibility of sharing it with more than one someone special. The future was still uncertain, still required patience and careful rebuilding of trust, but it was a future filled with music, and that made all the difference. 3 weeks into November, Michael's life had developed a new rhythm. Tuesday evenings were for family dinners at Carmen's house, where Sarah was gradually being integrated into their neighborhood circle. Thursday afternoons meant music practice with Emma, who had convinced Mrs. Patterson to let them prepare a Christmas concert performance. Saturdays belonged to family time, cautious but increasingly comfortable outings where Michael, Jake, and Sarah relearned how to be together. The breakthrough came on a rainy Wednesday evening when Jake got sick. Michael was in his office, wrestling with a particularly challenging logo design when he heard Jake calling from upstairs. The tone of his son's voice, weak and miserable, sent Michael running up the stairs 2 at a time. He found Jake in the bathroom, pale and shaky, having just thrown up his dinner. "Hey, buddy, what's wrong?" Michael felt Jake's forehead. "Definitely. Running a fever. My stomach hurts really bad," Jake whispered, "and I feel dizzy." Michael's mind immediately went into crisis mode. Thermometer, children's Tylenol, ginger ale, comfortable clothes. He was reaching for his phone to call Jake's pediatrician when Jake grabbed his arm. "Dad, can you call Mum?" The request caught Michael off guard. "Your mum? Jake, it's just a stomach bug. I can handle this." "I know you can, but I want her here too." Michael studied his son's flushed face. In 3 years of single parenting, Jake had never asked for his mother during illness. He'd always turned to Michael for comfort and care. This felt like a significant shift. "Are you sure?" Jake nodded weakly. "Please," Michael called Sarah, explaining the situation and Jake's request. She was at their house within 15 minutes, arriving with a pharmacy bag full of supplies and a worried expression that reminded Michael of the early years of their marriage when any threat to Jake's well-being had united them completely. "How is he?" she asked, shaking rain from her coat. "Fever of 101, nauseous, complaining of stomach pain. I think it's just a bug, but he specifically asked for you." Sarah's eyes softened. "He did?" "He did." They went upstairs together, finding Jake curled up in bed with the covers pulled up to his chin. When he saw Sarah, he reached out his arms like a much younger child. "Mom, I feel terrible." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and felt his forehead with the practiced motion of motherhood. "Oh, sweetie, you're burning up." What happened next felt like slipping back into a well-worn routine. Sarah took charge of monitoring Jake's temperature and getting fluids into him. Michael handled the practical aspects, calling the pediatrician's after-hours line, preparing the guest room in case Sarah needed to stay over, making Jake's favorite sick day food of plain toast and weak tea. They moved around each other with surprising ease, their shared concern for Jake overriding any awkwardness about their own relationship. When Jake asked if they could both sit with him while he tried to sleep, they arranged themselves on either side of his bed without discussion. "Will you sing something?" Jake asked drowsily. "Like you used to when I was little?" Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. They had indeed sung to Jake when he was younger, simple lullabies and children's songs that had been part of their bedtime routine. "What would you like to hear?" Sarah asked softly. "The moon song, you remember." Michael did remember. Blue Moon. Not the original jazz standard, but their own simplified version with harmony, parts they'd worked out during Jake's colicky infant months. Sarah started the melody, her voice soft and soothing. Michael joined in on the harmony, their voices blending as naturally as if they'd never stopped singing together. Jake's breathing grew deeper and more regular as they sang, his face relaxing into peaceful sleep. When the song ended, they sat, in comfortable silence, both reluctant to break the spell of the moment. "I'd forgotten how good we sounded together," Sarah whispered. "I'd forgotten a lot of things," Michael replied quietly. They stayed with Jake until his fever broke around midnight, taking turns checking on him and bringing him water. When it became clear that he was sleeping soundly and the worst had passed, Sarah gathered her things to leave. "Thank you for calling me," she said, as Michael walked her to the door. "It meant everything to be here for this. Thank you for coming. Jake needed you tonight." Sarah paused on the front porch, rain still pattering softly around them. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you were singing with Emma at the talent show, what were you thinking about?" The question surprised him. "I was thinking about how right it felt, how I'd forgotten what it was like to create something beautiful with another person." Sarah nodded slowly. "That's what tonight felt like for me. Taking care of Jake together, singing to him. It felt like creating something beautiful, like we were still good at being parents together, even if we're not good at being married anymore." Michael considered this. Maybe being good parents together is enough to build on. Maybe it is. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling much better, but with a new perspective on his parents' relationship. "You guys were really good together last night," he said over breakfast. "Like you didn't argue about anything or act weird around each other." "Is that what you've been worried about?" Michael asked. "That your mom and I argue?" Jake shrugged. "I guess. I remember some fighting before Mom left. I was worried it would be like that again." Michael felt a pang of guilt. He and Sarah had tried to shield Jake from their marital problems, but children notice more than adults give them credit for. "Jake," Michael said carefully, "your mom and I are still figuring out how to be a family again. But what happened last night showed me something important. We're both committed to taking care of you, no matter what else happens between us. So you're not going to get remarried and everything goes back to exactly how it was before?" Michael was struck by his son's perceptiveness. "I don't know what's going to happen with your mom and me romantically, but I do know that we're going to be your parents forever, and we're going to do that job together from now on." Jake seemed satisfied with this answer. "Good, because I like having both of you around, but I don't want you to pretend to be happy if you're not." Later that morning, while Jake was at school, Michael found himself thinking about the previous evening. The easy coordination he and Sarah had demonstrated, the way their voices had harmonized without conscious effort, the sense of rightness that had settled over the three of them. It reminded him of his musical partnership with Emma, the way they'd instinctively known how to support each other's voices, how they'd created something greater than the sum of their individual parts. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Tom Bradley from the music store. "Michael, I've got a proposition for you. You interested in playing a gig?" "A gig?" "Murphy's Pub is doing a special acoustic night next Friday. 3 or 4 singer-songwriters, intimate setting, good crowd. I mentioned you to the owner after I saw you at open mic, and he's interested in having you perform." Michael's first instinct was to say no. Performing with Emma at a school talent show was one thing. Performing solo at a bar was entirely different. "I don't know, Tom. I haven't played solo in years. That's exactly why you should do it. You've got your confidence back with the duet stuff. Time to stretch those wings a little more." Michael found himself considering it. The thought of performing alone was terrifying, but it was also exciting in a way he hadn't experienced in years. How long would the set be? 20 minutes? 4 or 5 songs? Nothing fancy, just you and a guitar. Can I think about it? Sure, but don't think too long. Spots like this don't come around often. After hanging up, Michael sat staring at his guitar case, which he'd moved from the closet to a corner of his office after the talent show. Inside was the acoustic guitar he'd bought in college, the one he'd used for countless practice sessions, and the handful of performances he'd done before Jake was born. On impulse, he opened the case and lifted out the instrument. It needed tuning, but the wood still gleamed with care, and the action felt comfortable under his fingers. He strummed a few chords, then found himself playing the opening to "Count on Me." The song sounded different on guitar than it had with the backing track at the talent show. More intimate, more personal. Michael found himself rearranging the melody, adding finger-picking patterns and vocal flourishes that showcased the song's emotional depth. By the time he looked up, an hour had passed, and he'd worked out guitar arrangements for 3 of his old original songs. His fingertips were sore, but his heart was racing with creative energy. When Emma knocked on his door that afternoon for their usual Thursday practice session, Michael made a decision. "Emma, I have something to tell you. I might be performing by myself next Friday night." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Where?" "At a place called Murphy's Pub. It's for adults, so you wouldn't be able to come, but I wanted you to know because you're the reason I'm brave enough to even consider it." Emma threw her arms around his waist in one of her signature hugs. "That's so exciting. You have to do it." "I'm scared," Michael admitted. "Good scared or bad scared?" Michael considered this distinction, which Emma had taught him weeks ago. Good scared was the kind of fear that came with exciting opportunities. Bad scared was the kind that came from real danger. Good scared, I think. "Then you definitely have to do it. What songs are you going to sing?" "I don't know yet. I've been working on some arrangements." "Ooh, can I help you practice? I'm really good at being an audience." For the next hour, Emma listened as Michael worked through possible song choices, offering feedback with the serious attention of a professional music critic. She was particularly enthusiastic about a song he'd written in college called "Finding Home," which he'd rearranged with a more mature perspective on love and loss. "That one makes me feel things," Emma announced after he finished playing it. "Happy things and sad things at the same time." That's exactly what I was going for. When Sarah arrived for dinner that evening, she'd been joining them for family meals twice a week. Michael told her about the performance opportunity. "That's wonderful," she said immediately. "You should absolutely do it." "You think so?" "Michael, I've heard you play guitar probably 1,000 times over the years, and you've never sounded better than you do right now. More confident, more emotionally connected to the music." Jake looked up from his homework. "Are you going to sing any of your old songs? The ones from your band?" "Maybe 1 or 2, but mostly newer arrangements of things I've been working on." "Will you sing the song you wrote about me when I was a baby?" Michael felt his chest tighten. He had written a song for Jake shortly after he was born, a simple lullaby about hopes and dreams and unconditional love. He'd only performed it once, at an open mic night when Jake was 6 months old. Sarah had been in the audience that night, nursing Jake in a back corner booth, both of them listening to Michael pour his heart out in 3-chord progression. "I don't know if that one's right for this kind of venue," Michael said carefully. Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand. "I think it would be perfect. It's one of the most beautiful songs you've ever written." That night, after Jake had gone to bed and Sarah had returned to her sister's house, Michael called Tom Bradley. "I'll do it," he said, without preamble. "Excellent. I had a feeling you would. Friday night, 8:30 slot, 20 minutes. You're going to be great." Michael hung up the phone and immediately felt a wave of panic. What had he just committed to? Solo performance in front of strangers, with no Emma to anchor him, no duet partner to share the spotlight. But underneath the panic was something else. Anticipation. For the first time in years, Michael was excited about sharing his music with people who had never heard it before. He was excited about the possibility of connecting with an audience through songs that meant something to him. He was excited about being a musician again, not just someone who had once been in a band or someone who could help a little girl with her talent show performance, but someone who had something to say and the skill to say it beautifully. The next 6 days would be a whirlwind of preparation, practice, and growing excitement. But that night, sitting in his quiet house with his guitar across his lap, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of making music for its own sake, not for anyone else's approval or expectation, but simply because he had songs inside him that needed to come out. And that feeling, he realized, was what coming home to himself actually meant. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November, as if the universe was conspiring to make Michael's solo debut as comfortable as possible. He spent the afternoon in final preparation, vocal warm-ups, guitar tuning, and a last-minute decision to include Finding Home as his opening number. Emma had appointed herself his official pre-performance coach, arriving at his door at 4:00 sharp with a thermos of honey tea that Carmen had prepared. "Professional singers drink this before concerts," she announced. "It makes your voice smooth and golden." Michael accepted the tea gratefully, touched by the gesture. "Are you nervous for me?" Emma considered this seriously. "A little bit, but it's the good kind of nervous, like when you're about to go on a really big roller coaster that you know is going to be amazing." At 5:30, Sarah arrived with Jake, both of them dressed nicely for what had become an unexpected family occasion. "We know we can't come to the actual performance," Sarah said, "but we wanted to wish you luck and maybe hear one song before you go." Michael set up in the living room, the same space where he and Emma had practiced their duet just over a month ago. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, creating a natural spotlight effect. "This is called Finding Home," he said, settling his guitar across his lap. "I wrote it a long time ago, but I've been thinking about it differently lately." He began the opening finger-picking pattern, a gentle arpeggio that built slowly into the melody. His voice, warmed up and confident, filled the room with lyrics about wandering and searching and finally discovering that home wasn't a place, but a feeling of belonging. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "Dad," Jake said softly, "that was really beautiful. I've never heard you sing like that before." "Like what?" "Like you really meant every word." Sarah wiped at her eyes discreetly. "Michael, that was extraordinary. I'm so proud of you for doing this." Emma, not to be outdone in the compliment department, stood up and applauded enthusiastically. "You're going to be the best one there. Everyone's going to love you." By 7:30, Michael was at Murphy's pub, guitar case slung over his shoulder and a folder of sheet music tucked under his arm. The venue was smaller than he'd expected, but full of character. Exposed brick walls covered with vintage music memorabilia, mismatched tables and chairs, and a tiny stage barely big enough for one person and a microphone stand. Tom Bradley was already there, chatting with a bearded man in his 50s who introduced himself as Pat Murphy, the pub owner. "You must be Michael," Pat said, shaking his hand firmly. "Tom's told me good things about you. First time playing solo." "First time in about 15 years, Michael admitted. "Well, you picked a good night for it. We've got music lovers here. Tonight, people who really listen, they'll appreciate what you're doing." The other performers were a mixed group. Janet Walsh, a folk singer in her 40s with a voice like warm honey. David Chen, a 20-something indie rocker with an impressive finger-picking technique. And Maria Santos, a jazz-influenced vocalist who could make any song sound like it belonged in a smoky nightclub. Michael listened to each of them during their sound checks, feeling simultaneously intimidated by their polish and reassured by their welcoming attitudes. When David heard that this was Michael's return to performing, he offered some encouragement. "Man, The hardest part is just getting back up there. Once you start playing, it all comes back. Trust your muscle memory. By 8:15, the pub was full. Michael spotted Tom Bradley at a table near the front, giving him a thumbs up. The audience was exactly what Pat had promised, an attentive mix of regular patrons and music enthusiasts who had clearly come specifically for the acoustic showcase. Janet Walsh opened the evening with a set of original folk songs that had the audience swaying along by the second number. David Chen followed with indie rock arrangements that showcased his technical skills while maintaining an emotional core. Maria Santos closed the first half with jazz standards that left everyone wanting more. During the intermission, Michael stepped outside for some air and found his hands shaking slightly. The familiar pre-performance adrenaline was kicking in, but it felt different than it had with Emma. This was his moment alone, his chance to share his own voice without the safety net of a duet partner. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Jake made me promise to tell you that he's proud of you no matter what happens tonight. We both are." Another message came from Carmen. "Emma is practicing scales in the backyard and sending you good singing energy. Break a leg." Michael smiled, feeling the love and support of his unexpected musical family, even though they weren't physically present. "Michael Stevens?" Pat Murphy appeared beside him. "You're up next, buddy. Ready?" Michael took a deep breath, picked up his guitar case, and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Walking onto the stage felt like stepping into a different version of himself. Michael, who had agreed to help Emma with her talent show, had been motivated by kindness and a desire not to disappoint a child. The Michael who was taking the stage at Murphy's pub was someone who had something to say, and the confidence to say it. He adjusted the microphone, settled onto the stool, and looked out at the expectant faces in the audience. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Michael Stevens, and this is my first solo performance in a very long time. I'm here tonight because a 7-year-old girl convinced me that music is always better when you share it with people who understand its power." A ripple of warm laughter went through the audience. "This first song is called Finding Home, and it's about the journey we all take to discover where we belong." He began the finger-picking intro and immediately felt the connection between his hands, his voice, and the room full of listeners. The song unfolded naturally, each verse building on the last, each chorus reaching a little deeper into the emotional truth at its core. When he finished, the applause was immediate and genuine. Michael felt a rush of confidence that carried him into his second song, a cover of The Night We Met by Lord Huron that he'd rearranged to highlight its themes of regret and second chances. For his third number, he made a spontaneous decision. "This next song is one I wrote about 13 years ago, right after my son was born. I've only performed it once before, but tonight feels like the right time to share it again. It's called Little Light." The lullaby he'd written for Jake flowed out of him with new layers of meaning. The original version had been about hopes and dreams for a newborn child. Tonight's version carried the weight of 13 years of actual parenting, the struggles and joys, the fears and triumphs, the profound love that had sustained him through single parenthood and was now helping him navigate the complexities of rebuilding his family. As he sang the final chorus, "You're my little light in the darkness, my reason to believe that love is enough to carry us through whatever comes to be," Michael saw tears in the eyes of several audience members. A woman at a corner table was openly crying, and even Tom Bradley was wiping at his eyes. When the song ended, the silence lasted longer than usual before the applause began. It was the kind of response that told Michael he had truly connected with his audience, that his vulnerability had been met with understanding. For his fourth song, he lightened the mood with an upbeat original called Saturday Morning Coffee, a celebration of small daily pleasures that had the audience tapping, along with the rhythm, As he prepared for his final number, Michael felt a presence he hadn't expected. Standing near the back of the room, having apparently slipped in during his previous song, was Sarah. She was alone, staying far enough back to avoid drawing attention, but her presence filled Michael with a warmth that surprised him. "This last song," he said into the microphone, "is for everyone who's ever had to learn how to harmonize with life when the melody changed unexpectedly." He launched into a song he'd written just that week, inspired by his journey from reluctant duet partner to confident solo performer. It was called Learning to Harmonize, and it wove together themes of music, family, love, and the courage it takes to keep singing even when you don't know how the song will end. The song built to a powerful climax where Michael's voice soared over complex finger-picking, then settled into a gentle outro that left the room in contemplative silence. The applause that followed was thunderous. People stood up, whistled, called for an encore. Michael felt overwhelmed by the response, by the recognition that his music had truly moved these strangers. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for listening, for letting me share these songs. With you, this has been incredible." As he packed up his guitar, audience members approached to compliment his performance and ask about future shows. Several people took his contact information, including a woman who ran a coffee shop that hosted regular acoustic nights. Tom Bradley was beaming when he reached the stage. "Michael, that was phenomenal. I've been coming to these showcases for years, and I've never seen a response like that. You got something special, son." Sarah appeared as the crowd began to thin out, her eyes bright with pride, and something else Michael couldn't quite identify. "I hope you don't mind that I came," she said. "I couldn't stay away. I needed to see you do this." "I'm glad you're here," Michael said honestly. "What did you think?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I think you've become the person you were always meant to be. The man I married was talented and kind and wonderful, but he was also afraid. The man I watched on that stage tonight isn't afraid anymore." "I'm still afraid sometimes," Michael said. "But I've learned that being afraid doesn't have to stop you from doing things that matter." They walked out to the parking lot together, Michael's guitar case swinging easily at his side. "Michael," Sarah said as they reached their cars, "I know we've been taking things slowly, figuring out how to be a family again, but after tonight, after seeing you up there so completely yourself, I don't want to wait anymore." Michael felt his heart skip. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to come home, really home, not just Saturday breakfasts and family dinners, but home, if you'll have me." Michael studied Sarah's face in the parking lot lamplight. 3 months ago, this moment would have been his greatest dream. 2 months ago, he might have said yes immediately out of longing and habit. But the man standing in that parking lot, the man who had just sung his heart out to a room full of strangers, was someone who knew the difference between wanting something and being ready for it. "Sarah, I love you. I think I always will. But I need to know that you're choosing this life, not just running back to it because being alone got hard." "I am choosing it," Sarah said firmly. "Michael, I spent 3 years learning who I am when I'm not part of us. And what I learned is that I'm better when I am part of us. Not because I need you to complete me, but because I choose to build something beautiful with you." Michael felt something shift inside his chest, like a harmony finally resolving to its home chord. "Then yes," he said, "come home." 6 months later, Michael was back on the stage at Murphy's Pub, but this time he wasn't alone. Emma Rodriguez, now 8 years old and even more confident than before, stood beside him at a second microphone, her clear voice blending perfectly with his on a duet arrangement of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." In the audience, Sarah sat with Jake and Carmen, all 3 of them beaming with pride. Tom Bradley was at his usual table, already planning the acoustic showcase, where he hoped to feature Michael as the headlining act. The performance was flawless, but more than that, it was joyful. Michael and Emma moved together on stage with the easy synchronization of true musical partners, each supporting the other's voice while adding their own unique interpretation to the classic song. When they finished, the standing ovation was immediate and sustained. Emma curtsied with theatrical flair, while Michael bowed, both of them grinning at the enthusiastic response. As they left the stage, hand in hand, Emma looked up at Michael with the serious expression she wore when she had something important to say. "Michael," she said, "I think we should write a song together, an original song, just for us." Michael smiled, thinking about how much his life had changed since a 7-year-old girl had knocked on his door asking for help with a talent show. "I think that's a perfect idea, partner. What should it be about?" Emma considered this carefully. "It should be about how music brings people together, and how sometimes the best harmonies happen when you least expect them." Michael squeezed her hand gently. "Emma Rodriguez, you are absolutely right." Later that night, as Sarah helped Jake with his homework and Michael worked on arrangements for their upcoming Christmas concert, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a man hiding from his own gifts, afraid of vulnerability, convinced that the best parts of his life were behind him. Tonight, he was a man who performed regularly, who had reunited with his lost love, who was part of a musical partnership that had grown into something bigger than either he or Emma could have imagined alone. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Mrs. Patterson from elementary school. "Michael, I hope I'm not calling too late. I have some exciting news to share with you and Emma." "What's that?" "I just got off the phone with the regional arts coordinator. They heard about your talent show performance and your recent concerts with Emma, and they want to invite you both to audition for the State Youth Arts Festival next spring." Michael felt his pulse quicken. The State Youth Arts Festival was a prestigious event that drew participants from across the region. "That's incredible, but Emma's only 8. Isn't that program usually for older kids?" "It is, but they're making an exception. They said your intergenerational collaboration represents exactly the kind of innovative programming they want to showcase. It would be a week-long festival with workshops, masterclasses, and a final concert performed in front of industry professionals. After hanging up, Michael called Carmen to share the news. Emma's excited squeals could be heard through the phone from 3 rooms away. "This is amazing, Michael," Carmen said. "Emma's been practicing even more than usual lately. I think she's been hoping for something like this. Carmen, I need to ask you something. If we get accepted to this festival, it would mean traveling out of state for a week. Emma would miss school, and there might be some costs involved." "Michael, stop right there. Emma's musical education is worth more than a week of regular school, and as for costs, we'll figure it out. This little girl has found her calling, and you've been instrumental in helping her discover it." The next morning brought another surprise. Sarah was in the kitchen when Michael came downstairs, making pancakes and humming one of the songs from his performance the night before. "You're here early," Michael said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you said last night, about being ready versus just wanting something." She turned in his arms to face him. "Michael, I want to show you something." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a photo of a small rental house about 6 blocks away from theirs. "It's available starting next month. I was thinking, maybe instead of me moving back in right away, I could rent this place. Close enough to be part of your daily lives, but separate enough that we can really rebuild our relationship intentionally." Michael studied the photo, then Sarah's face. "You want to take it even slower?" "I want to do it right this time. I want Jake to get used to having me around again without feeling like his safe space with you is being invaded. I want us to date each other again, properly, without the pressure of immediately being a nuclear family again. And you want to prove to yourself that you can be independent and still choose to be with us," Michael added, understanding. "Exactly. Is that okay with you?" Michael kissed her forehead gently. "It's more than okay. It's perfect." Jake appeared, in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the smell of pancakes and the sound of conversation. "Are you guys talking about serious stuff again?" he asked, with the directness of someone who had learned not to avoid difficult topics. "We're talking about your mom getting her own place nearby so she can be part of our lives while we all figure out how to be a family again," Michael explained. Jake considered this while pouring syrup on his pancakes. "So like you'd have your own apartment, Mom, but you'd still come to dinner and stuff. That's the idea. And maybe sometimes you could stay over at my place when you want to. It would give you two homes instead of feeling like someone's taking your original home away." "That sounds good," Jake said approvingly. "Can I help you decorate? I have opinions about furniture." The following weeks passed in a flurry of preparation and change. Sarah found and rented the house she'd shown Michael, a cozy two-bedroom cottage, with a small garden that reminded her of the places she'd dreamed about during her years in Portland. Emma threw herself into preparing for their potential audition with the intensity of someone much older, practicing scales and working on breath control with a dedication that impressed even Carmen. Michael found himself busier than he'd been in years, balancing his graphic design work with regular performances at Murphy's Pub, practice sessions with Emma, and the delicate process of rebuilding his relationship with Sarah. But it was a good kind of busy, the kind that came from having multiple meaningful pursuits rather than just obligations. One evening in early December, as Michael was working on a new song arrangement, Emma knocked on his door with unusual formality. "Michael, I need to have a serious conversation with you about our musical partnership." Michael set down his guitar, recognizing Emma's business tone. "What's on your mind?" "Well, I've been thinking about the festival audition, and I realized something important. We're really good together, but we've been doing mostly covers and songs you wrote. I think for the audition, we should do something that's really ours, something we create together from the very beginning." Michael was impressed by her insight. "You want to co-write an original song?" "Yes, and I have some ideas already. I've been writing down words and melodies that come into my head, and I think they could be part of something bigger." Emma pulled out a small notebook covered with stickers and opened it to reveal pages of carefully written lyrics and simple musical notation. "Emma, this is incredible. You've been composing?" "Mom got me a keyboard for my birthday, and I've been figuring out melodies. Listen to this one." She hummed a simple but beautiful melody that had an unexpectedly sophisticated harmonic structure. Over the next hour, Michael watched in amazement as Emma shared idea after idea, lyrical concepts about friendship and growing up, melodic fragments that showed real musical intuition, and even some thoughts about how their voices could work together in new ways. "There's something else," Emma said as they wrapped up their impromptu songwriting session. "I think our song should tell a story, not just about us, but about how music can change people's lives, like how it changed yours." Michael felt a flutter of emotion at her words. "What kind of story?" "A story about someone who forgot how to sing, and then remembered because someone believed in them, but not like a fairy tale, like a real story about real people." The song they began writing that night would eventually become "The Harmony We Found," a piece that chronicled Michael's journey from musical isolation to renewed purpose through his partnership with Emma. But the process of creating it revealed something even more significant. Emma wasn't just Michael's musical partner anymore. She was becoming a true collaborator, someone with her own artistic vision and the skills to express it. Meanwhile, Sarah's transition into her new life in Cedar Falls was progressing smoothly. Her cottage became a gathering place for their extended family, hosting dinner parties where Carmen could relax without cooking, Jake could spread his homework across a different table, and Michael could play guitar by a fireplace instead of in his home office. The arrangement was working exactly as Sarah had hoped. She and Michael were rediscovering each other as adults who had grown and changed, rather than trying to resurrect their younger selves. Jake was thriving with the stability of two homes and the security of knowing both his parents were committed to his well-being. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said one evening as she and Michael cleaned up after dinner at her place. "I spent 3 years in Portland thinking I needed more space and freedom, and it turns out what I actually needed was the right kind of space and freedom." "What do you mean?" "I mean space to be myself within a relationship rather than space from the relationship entirely, freedom to grow and change without losing the people I love." Michael understood exactly what she meant. His own journey back to music had been similar, not a rejection of his responsibilities as a father, but a way of being more fully himself within that role. December brought the formal audition for the State Youth Arts Festival. Michael and Emma traveled to the Regional Arts Center, their original song polished and ready. The audition panel consisted of 3 professional musicians and an arts education coordinator, all of whom listened with serious attention as Michael and Emma performed "The Harmony We Found." The song opened with Michael singing alone about losing his musical voice, then Emma's voice joining in to represent hope and possibility. The middle section featured complex harmonies that showcased both their individual strengths and their collaborative chemistry. The finale brought their voices together in a triumphant celebration of rediscovered joy in music. When they finished, the panel was quiet for a long moment. "That was an original composition?" the lead panelist asked. "Co-written by both of us," Emma answered confidently. "Michael did most of the guitar parts and I wrote most of the melody, but we worked on the words together." "The lyrics are remarkably mature for someone your age," another panelist observed. "I've learned a lot about life from my partnership with Michael," Emma replied. "He's taught me that good songs come from true experiences." 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Michael and Emma had been invited to participate in the State Youth Arts Festival as the youngest collaborative team in the program's history. Carmen cried when she read the letter. Michael felt a surge of pride that was different from anything he'd experienced, not just pride in Emma's talent, but pride in their creative partnership and what they'd accomplished together. The festival was still months away, but already Michael could feel how much the experience was going to change both of them. Emma was growing as a musician and a person, developing confidence and artistic vision that went far beyond her years. Michael was discovering that mentorship was as rewarding as performance, that helping someone else find their voice had somehow helped him find his own more clearly. On Christmas morning, the extended family gathered at Michael's house. Sarah, Jake, Emma, Carmen, and even Tom Bradley, who had become something of a musical grandfather figure to Emma. Under the tree was a gift that surprised everyone. A professional quality recording of Michael and Emma's talent show performance, which Mrs. Patterson had commissioned from the school's audio-visual department. "I thought you might want to have a record of where it all started," she explained when she arrived to deliver the CD personally. They listened to the recording together, marveling at how natural their voices sounded together, even in that first performance. Emma giggled at some of her dance moves, while Michael was struck by how fearless they'd both been on that stage. "Play the new song next," Jake suggested, and Michael retrieved his guitar for an impromptu living room concert of "The Harmony We Found." As their voices blended in the familiar melody, Michael looked around the room at the faces of the people who had become his chosen family. Sarah, whose return had taught him the difference between settling for something and choosing it intentionally. Jake, whose wisdom and emotional intelligence continued to amaze him. Emma, whose belief in the power of music had awakened his own sleeping gifts. Carmen, whose friendship and support had made their unconventional partnership possible. Tom, whose encouragement had pushed Michael back onto stages he'd never thought he'd see again. This was harmony in its truest form, not just voices blending in song, but lives interweaving to create something more beautiful than any of them could have achieved alone. The song ended, and in the quiet moment that followed, Emma made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I've decided something," she said, with the seriousness she reserved for important declarations. "When I grow up, I don't just want to be a singer, I want to be a music teacher too, like Mrs. Patterson, because the best thing about music isn't just making it, it's sharing it with people and helping them find their own voices." Michael felt his heart swell with pride and recognition. Emma had discovered what he was only now beginning to understand, that the greatest gift of musical ability wasn't the applause or the recognition, but the opportunity to pass that gift on to others. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and Jake was asleep, Michael and Sarah sat on the porch swing Sarah had installed at her cottage, wrapped in blankets and watching snow fall under the streetlights. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Emma had never knocked on your door that morning?" Sarah asked. Michael considered this. "I think I would have stayed stuck, not unhappy exactly, but not really living either, just going through the motions. I think I would have stayed in Portland, telling myself I was happy while slowly becoming more and more miserable," Sarah said. "It's funny how one little girl's request for help ended up changing so many lives. She's pretty remarkable. She is, but so are you, Michael. The man who performed at Murphy's Pub, the man who co-wrote a song with an 8-year-old, the man who's rebuilding his family with patience and wisdom. That's who you really are. That's who you were all along, underneath the fear." Michael pulled Sarah closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and marveling at how right this felt. Not like going backward to who they used to be, but like moving forward to who they were becoming. In the distance, he could hear Emma practicing scales in her bedroom, her clear voice carrying through the quiet neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring new songs to write, new harmonies to discover, new ways of blending their voices to create something beautiful. And Michael Stevens, once afraid to sing in front of anyone, now knew that the best songs were always yet to be written. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.